few more questions from emails. We're going to talk about Chapter 7, Vertical Integration and Outsourcing and Strategic Alliance. Okay. So the final group project, you're going to pick a ceramic product to present to the CEO of CCC, Ceramics, Cascade Ceramics Company, and I am going to be the CEO. You guys all know that, right? Yes, good. Excuse me. Each group will meet with me after the midterm. So this week, email me and set up an appointment. I will prefer to do it in my office hours, which is right after class. Also, I can do it if most of your team is not available, then go ahead and email me an alternate time, which is fine. Just not at 10 o'clock at night or 5 o'clock in the morning. It is up to your group to schedule the meeting. It is a mandatory meeting, so schedule the meeting or I'm going to not give you a very good grade on the final. Actually, you're not even going to pass the class. All right, so again, 50-minute page minimum, not including title page and all the other good stuff. Paper written for the president of CCC, which is me. Single space, Times Roman, font size 12, justified format, just like you've been doing. So since you are writing the paper for me, you know that I know the business is ceramics business, so you don't explain things to me. Don't insult me by telling me what a ceramics product is or whatever you guys feel you need to explain. Since I am the president of CCC, I know the ceramics industry inside and out. So treat me like a professional, like I am, like you would a president that you'd be giving an actual presentation to. Okay, so the title page was student's name in alphabetical order, table of contents, dot to the page numbers, executive summary, charts, tables, and business format throughout the report. If you put them in the report, that's fine, not in the back of the report. Make sure you put them in the back if you're going to do that. Make sure there's a reference to them. I know what they are for. A lot of people just throw a bunch of figures out there and they'll refer to them in the thing, and then you have to flip back and forth. Business report, you don't want to do that. Okay, academic report, you can do that all you want. Business report, you don't really want to do that. Okay, so in real life, GE is cutting up to 13,000 jobs, which they've already done, as its jet engine division became, because of the pandemic. GE posted a roughly $2 billion quarter loss as revenues tumbled 24%, hurt by a steep decline in jet engine business. So that's what's going on in the real world of ceramics and jet engines. GE uses pandemic to cut 25% of the job force. There's already a declining industry. Most companies, even not in the aerospace industry or even related, will use this pandemic as an excuse to cut 15 to 30% of the job force, which is dead weight to construct company. And then they'll hire back cheaper labor. U.S. jobs report from the Labor Department is expected to show employers shed nearly 30 million positions. Some estimates are higher, as high as 40. Some are lower than 20. But really, it's ridiculous at how many jobs are being lost. All right, back to the deliverables. Just thought I'd add that in there. CCC has hired you as a consulting team to help with this problem. The problem is we need to find a new revenue stream. Your immediate assignment is to figure out how to increase revenue within the next 12 months. Your second goal is to create a sustainable midterm solution for the next 5 years. And then your bonus solution is to do a long-term revenue generating solution that will withstand the test of time. Okay, so the report's 50 pages, like I said. Make sure to include all the great stuff you learned in this term in my class, and describe your steps your team followed to undertake and complete its analysis of the case. Somebody asked me for the matrix. I already posted this, and it's already in the slides in week 2, but I will go ahead and repeat myself for the sake of just repeating myself. So 20 points basically for format, following directions, making sure you answer the questions correctly. And by no means, I'm kind of hesitant to actually, even do a matrix, because this isn't, don't follow this verbatim. This isn't don't follow this outline. This is just suggestions of what you need to do. for the strategic case analysis, like the external environment. Remember, we gave you the Pestel, Porter's 5 Forces, competitive environment. So that's worth 20 points. What are the firm's resources, capabilities, and competencies? So you review what the firm is capable of doing. Internal analysis, which is a SWOT, all those good stuff, VRIO. And then analyze the firm's current business strategy. So come up with a strategy. How are you going to, how is the business going to enter into the market? What are they going to do? And then, we had a couple of people last quarter said they're going to outsource the company to China. That completely is, I gave them an F. That is completely not what this assignment is about. And then I had to go back and give them a passing grade. But anyway, I gave them an F for the report. I told them the report was horrible. That was the first thing they said. And that was the first thing I told them not to do, but they did it anyway. So part of the assignment is listening to directions, following directions, and talking to your customer. Your customer needs this, and you have to deliver this for them. Okay. So consider the other 9 groups. In this class, we have 10 groups. So consider the other 9 groups your competition. You want this job as a consultant for my company, and you're competing with 9 other companies to get this job. So your executive summary is going to have to knock it out of the ballpark. That's going to be the first thing I'm going to read and going to be the first thing I'm going to judge your reports on. If I don't like your executive summary, I'm going to throw it in the trash can, right? But because I'm your professor, I have to read the whole report, no matter how bad it is, and give you a grade, right? So, so your executive summary is very important. I've stressed this many, many times. So what questions do you have for me on this? Other than your meetings, this is the last time I'm going to go over it.
All right, so we can only choose one product to produce, and that's it?
No, you can choose as many products as you want. But
Okay,
I suggest only choosing 1 or 2. Some groups did 3. They had to, because you have to do the analysis on the market, right? And present it to me. Say, hey, Ken, we're going to make a ceramic dental teeth. And, so you have to actually do some research on what that market and how you're going to pitch that to me. Okay. So if you do 3 different products, you're going to do research for 3 different industries. Other questions, concerns? All right. So everybody has a group. Everybody's in a group. Right, Dennis?
I'm still working on getting the last couple of people who weren't able to join a group into one.
Okay. I downloaded your spreadsheet, so update me and where you're going to put them, because I already have it.
Will do.
Here, let's see. Hold on 1 second. All right, so no, that's my afternoon class. All right, so we have 10 groups. Okay, so we have some room. So plug them into a group and let me know which ones you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, so group 10 and 6, 7, and 8, I think. How many people do you have? Just 2?
I think 2 or 3, but people, I believe.
Okay. All right, plug them in 6, 7, and 8. And then 10 if you need to.
One more question. When you, Professor?
Yes.
So when you say meet at your office hours, you mean like starting next week, right? Not this week.
If you want to start this week, you can, but I would meet no later than the end of next week.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Thank
I'm
you.
usually available in the mornings from like 9 to 10. I do have to do a few things for work this week on Tuesday and Thursday, but other than that, I'm good.
Noted. Thank you.
Mhm. All right. So chapter 7, your book talked about Dell, how Dell is does a lot of outsourcing. They buy all their parts. Excuse me. And then they outsource and concentrate on doing a lot of the specialty assembling. And what they can do is they can get your computer, and they're still very good at that. They also bought out Alienware, which is their high-end computers, gaming computers. So you can also do. They talked about how they outsource all the high-end products, all the high-end parts. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, everybody was a computer company. You could buy all the parts, assemble the computer, put your little logo on it, and you're good to go. So a lot of these companies just sprung up overnight. They were outsourcing all the major parts. What you basically would do would buy the case, put up whatever you wanted inside the computer, as far as hard drive, RAM, and memory, and what kind of Intel board that you wanted, the speed and everything. So outsourcing the computer has been, it's been done by a lot of different companies. Dell has actually made it one of the few that's made it very successful. And they customize your computer. You can call them up on the phone and say, hey, this is what I want, this is what I need. And they'll customize it and ship it to you within a few days, which is actually pretty good. Most of the other computers weren't able to do that. Couple of the other computer companies that did it were bought up, Gateway, a few others. ALR, but they also did a lot of different things as far as what they specialized in. So Dell wasn't so much starting off specializing in business for business computers, as opposed to what some of these other companies like Compaq kind of specialized in education. HP specialized in business. IBM. So those are kind of the different outsourcing and vertical markets, bringing business or activities previously conducted by outside companies in-house. So a lot of these companies started like Apple, outsourced all their parts, and now they're bringing them in-house. That's an example of vertical integration. And the value chain, we've gone over and over and over, so everybody knows the value chain. All right. So the forwards and backwards integration review of last week, what we talked about, how some companies are going back and doing the raw materials, like battery companies for the EV. Tesla has made a big investment. Volkswagen has made a big investment in that, as opposed to after sales and service and marketing, selling directly to the end user, like Tesla does with their products. The oil industry, this chapter talks a lot about the oil industry because they're a perfect example of outsourcing, how they do a lot of different things in the value chain, how Chevron does everything from exploration and finding the crude oil all the way to selling the crude oil at the gas stations. So they basically do the entire value chain. This is kind of like a diagram of how not only do we get gasoline from crude oil, we also get a lot of other things like natural gas, fuels and lubricants, and chemical products, everything from plastic to cleaners. That's why you see a lot of these companies that Chevron and some of the Shell and some of these other companies, not only do they sell oil and gas, but they also sell a lot of these plastic products also. So they're also heavily invested in the value chain. All right. So the 3 C's, remember that. Conduct the activity internally when the firm has or can develop better capabilities to perform in the other firms. Coordination, conduct the activity internally when effective coordinated and tight integration of the activity with other firms activates, provides product performance. So when you're making products or bringing them in-house from outside, you got to make sure you coordinate them correctly. You can't build 50,000 cars and not have any air conditioning units, right? So you have to coordinate that accordingly. So you have to be able to put the products, or if you run out of nuts and bolts, you can't build your cars, right? So you have to coordinate that accordingly. Control, conduct the activity internally to control sources inputs. Coal integrates back into bauxite to secure scarce and critical raw materials for aluminum. So I don't know if you guys know this, but it's, a lot of time there's an aluminum shortage. So you can't make sodas. The company Pepsi and Coke, they have nothing to put their sodas in, so they have to put them in plastic bottles. They don't have the cans. So sometimes in the store shelves, especially with what's going on with the pandemic, you'll see that there's no canned soda on the shelves. That's because there's a shortage of aluminum, of the bauxite. Okay. So I'm seeing some chat about your groups. Both your TA has put your groups online, so you guys should have all your emails and everything in your group so you can contact each other. Correct, Dennis?
Yes, the link is on the announcement page of iLearn.
Okay. So you guys can be able to, so you can email each other. Now you have all your contact information in your groups, and that's on the Blackboard. All right, so capabilities, which refers to the question of whether the firm can build the capabilities to perform the activity better than other firms. So your capabilities, for example, how Toyota has bought into a lot of their suppliers. They own part of the firms. So the capabilities are them being able to get their product. Some of the other capabilities, like Honda has built motors for almost 100 years now. And their capabilities are they know how to build the motors. They know how to put them into all kinds of different vehicles. And along with Nike, Nike designs its own shoes, but outsources the manufacturing to other companies. Nike knows their capabilities, that their strong suit is marketing, sales, and designing of shoes. They know that they'd be able to save money if they outsource the manufacturing of their shoes, and instead of spending time and money and resources and capabilities on manufacturing, they let another company do that. Okay. So Nike creates barriers to imitation to prevent subcontractors from its shoes from becoming competitors. And the way they do that is with contracts. Disney does the same thing. You can't just make a Disney character and sell it online. Disney's gonna come after you with full vengeance and force of their lawyers. So what you have to do is you have to get a contract in order to sell those products. And Disney's one of the companies that does that. They don't make any of their products. They contract, well, they almost none of their products, and they contract that out to other companies who manufacture everything from the princess dresses to the the cups and all that other stuff that have their logo and everything else on them. Subcontractors, a supplier that provides an input to a local firm. The term subcontractor is often used to describe suppliers that are contracted to create customized inputs for firms. So a lot of these companies, you can call them subcontractors. Everything from one person can be a subcontractor to a whole huge company can be a subcontractor. Okay, I use technicians as subcontractors in my business. So, okay, so coordination, which refers to the question of whether a firm is better able to effectively coordinate the activity with other activities in the firm when both are conducted internally. So if you're making your nuts and bolts, your ceramic nuts and bolts in-house and using them in your high heat products that you make for thermal type engines, as opposed to outsourcing them, how are you going to coordinate those? So if you're building the nuts and bolts, are you going to build 1,000 at a time, or just as you need them? Or are you going to coordinate buying them, outsourcing them, buying 10,000 at a time because you get a better price? Or are you just going to buy them as you need them? So that's what it means by coordination. Okay. Apple has done this for many, many years. Now they're starting to bring everything in-house. The greater the independency between activities, the more it takes sense to vertically integrate and have these done within a company. So Apple's was having issues with AMD and some of the other companies getting their motherboards and chips. So Apple just said, hey, we're going to make them ourselves. So we don't have that problem. We can get the raw materials. We have the billions of dollars where we can invest in all this other type of manufacturing activities. So we'll just do it ourselves. So sometimes it's better that way. Sometimes, it turns around and bites you in the butt. Okay, so Apple used to outsource design manufacturing most of the chips, Motorola, Intel, and AMD. Now Apple executives cited they were better coordinated product development activities if Apple designs and manufactures its own chips. So they were actually able to coordinate this, develop it and design it, and make sure that they have it on time for all their Apple products. Of course, so with all the delays sometimes with Apple releasing their products, you kind of wonder about that. All right. So designing their own chips would make it more difficult for competitors to imitate Apple technology because competitors wouldn't have access to Apple's design chips. So the advantages with Apple, some of these other companies, high-tech companies, they can actually make the product, design it, and it'll work better. As you can see, Apple and Samsung are always copying different types of things that each other does. So when they develop new products, the key reason that Apple decided to go backward to integrate and bring the chip design in-house is so they can't easily imitate some of their stuff. So you can have your product on the market for 6 months before anybody tries to imitate it, and you can pretty much saturate the market with your product. Okay. Ooh, look at those ceramic. Automakers use standardized nuts and bolts to assemble cars. No need to make their own nuts and bolts because they don't require a high level of coordination with other inputs. So you can actually, buy 1 million nuts and bolts and put them into storage, or not into storage, but into inventory, and use them as you need them. The cost isn't really high, and the cost to actually make them would be more than what it would be to that the company could justify. Okay, so sequential independence is when a firm cannot perform its task until another firm has completed its task. Cannot create the air conditionings in the system until the overall vehicle has been designed because they need to know all the specifications of what how it's going to go into the car, what the dimensions are and everything. So that's a sequential independence. Some activities are reciprocal independence. Some activities or tasks require a high degree of coordination because tasks are reciprocal independent. Good performance achieves through simultaneously repetitive processes. Each individual must work in close coordination with other team members, complete their task only through process of iterative knowledge of sharing. So you have to be able to know what the other person is doing. Engines are reciprocal independent with many other activities. So if you don't have the engine in the car, you can't run a lot of the other systems that need to be run. So they have to have a reciprocal independence. Okay. So the harder or the more teamwork that you need, the higher the independence is, or interdependence, and the lower teamwork that you need to complete the job is the lower the teamwork. Okay, and all this is explained in your book. I'm just going over it to make sure you guys remember it. Okay, so control, which refers to a firm's desire to maintain control over a valuable activity or input in the value chain. Organizational leaders must ask, to what extent would we maintain control over a critical step in the value chain, conducting this activity ourselves? So you have to decide, the upper management has to decide if it's going to be beneficial, the cost, the amount of extra people needs to be able to do this, so the labor cost and everything else. So sometimes it's not just beneficial. Like for example, when I told you about when I was manufacturing the remanufactured toner cartridges. So I'm spending all this money on labor, on materials, and I can actually buy them cheaper from somebody else. So obviously that's not a control issue. Even though the quality, I can control the quality of the product, it definitely wasn't worth it when I could find somebody that would make it just as good a product for a lower price. Okay, so VW invest in the battery makers. QuantumScape is a company that makes batteries for the EV cars. So Volkswagen invested $300 million into that, along with Bill Gates and Klein Perkins, other heavy hitters and billionaires. So these Volkswagen obviously doesn't want to do this themselves, but they want the technology and have more control over it. So they invest in it in the company, like Toyota did with many of their companies. Okay, so the merger. Remember how we talked sometimes, most of the time, that mergers don't make sense or they don't benefit from it. All they do is kind of monopolize the industry. Well, this one actually achieved its goal, and they started at 3.3 billion, and the market cap came out to 14 billion, and the Kingston Capital acquisition of Volkswagen, QuantumScape, and all that others. So this is actually one time where a merger did, or an acquisition did come out. And you're going to see this more and more with car companies merging, doing joint ventures. Okay, so for example, your book talks about the crude oil is best shipped to the oil refinery through a pipeline, unless you're the new president, where you put an executive order and you cancel the pipeline. So the first, so it's actually more cost effective to do a pipeline and safer to do a pipeline because you don't have a bunch of trucks on the road filled up with oil. So what happens is, it's called a transition specific asset, like a pipeline where you cannot use it really for anything else. What are you going to transport from Canada down into the United States? Water, or some other type of liquid. There's really nothing else you're going to use it for. Same way with bowling alleys. Bowling alleys are an example of that also. So you have a pipeline that moves crude oil from point A to point B in a safe and costly manner. That is less costly. So when you do an executive order and cancel that pipeline, actually you cancel all the permits to build that pipeline. What you're doing is you are not only creating a more hazardous way to move the oil from point A to point B, because you're still going to have the demand for the oil. You're just not going to have a cheap and safe way to move it from point A to point B. So you're going to have to find an alternative to move it, either by train or by truck. That's my political statement for today about oil and pipelines. Okay, so in real life, your book says making 90 at 98 cents versus buying at $1. It actually is more like 15% in real life. So when you guys are out in the real world after school and are working in the business world, somebody says, hey, we're going to save 5%. And you're going to say, okay, but there's other costs involved. There's other situations involved. And as a rule of thumb, it's usually, if you can't save 15% on switching, then it's not going to be worth doing it. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it isn't. And then in other cases, it's up as high as 25%. So always consider all the other things that go into switching costs, as opposed to running crude oil through a pipeline, as opposed to trucking it. The demand's not going to change, but your cost is going to change and other things are going to change. Okay, so dangers of vertical integration: loss of flexibility. When many activities are managed in the value chain, the flexibility to quickly make changes to the business is lost. So for example, on the oil pipeline, so it's going to take them a while to adjust to trucks, to train, because the The demand is still there and it's not going to change, and they did nothing to change the demand. So the demand is always going to be there. They're just going to have to make changes on how to get the oil from point A to point B. This is important, especially when there are major technological and manufacturing changes. We use Nike for an example, choose to outsource the production of its shoes because of the ability to switch suppliers depending on which supplier is lowest cost, or even natural disasters. Sometimes a hurricane or a tsunami will hit a manufacturing plant, and Nike has plants all over the world, so they can easily ramp up production in one and another plant. Okay, loss of focus refers to the fact that more different types of activities a firm needs to manage, the harder it is to be a world-class in all of them. So for example, GM made almost 70% of its parts internally for cars, as opposed to Toyota that only made 25%. General Motors had to deal with contracts, they had to deal with different vendors, and they had to deal with all different types of things. Somebody told me that it cost $300 to process a purchase order. And I told them they're crazy. That's no way. And then I did business with the county of Riverside. So 8 people actually, when I did a job for them, 8 people actually had to touch the invoice or the process of getting paid. And I added it up, and then those salaries and time and everything, it added up to actually more than $300. So, you have these hidden costs all over everywhere that most people are not generally aware of. I wasn't aware of it. And after I found out that 8 people actually physically touched my paperwork once I submitted an invoice to them, I wasn't shocked, but it's the government and how, their process and how they do things. Even though there's systems of control, there's also a lot of waste. So. Okay, so because of GM's lack of focus, suppliers are able to have lower costs based on focus on narrow products line and producing those products in large scale for multiple things, like Toyota did. They not only do they companies specialize in their products to make their parts and everything else, and they can do it a lot cheaper than what GM can do internally. All right, so dangers of outsourcing, loss of control or power. You give up to your outside vendor. The quality that they can make is sometimes not always the best. Sometimes not getting all the raw materials. They might be late on fulfilling orders. And then for yourself, loss of capabilities may set it in motion. The loss of capability that may be important for the future of a competitor. So your competitor, like for example, on the ceramics thing, I said you can't sell the the ceramics thing that you're currently making. You can't sell them to a competitor. Obviously, you don't want to have some company out there selling the same product to competitors at a cheaper price, giving them an advantage over what you can. And you can't control that. And then loss of intellectual property. Caterpillar has a big problem with this, outsourcing a lot of its stuff. All right, so we're going to talk about strategic alliances for a few minutes. Disney and Oriental Land Company, a Japanese company, cooperative arrangement in which 2 or more firms combine their resources and capabilities to create the new value. So Disney obviously had the characters. They have all the designs for the theme park and the rides. They have their management and process. They know how to manage their parks and their resources, and Disney has an online stream or ongoing stream of Disney characters and movies, and they keep pumping these things out. Oriental, what Disney didn't have is they didn't know how to buy the land and didn't have all the capital for the land needed in Tokyo. They didn't have the financial resources set up there to actually go into Japan, and relationship with construction firms. They didn't have all those things. So Oriental Land Company did have all those things, and Disney had all the great things that Disney had. So the strategic alliance was Oriental Land Company would go ahead and buy the land, do the development, do the financing, and Disney would provide all the great products. So that's when you would have a strategic alliance, is when 2 different entities need each other to do business. So another, choosing a strategic alliance, how to choose whether to create an alliance. You make it, buy it, or create an alliance. If you can make it, there's no need to ally or buy. If you can buy it, there's no need to make or ally. And ally, you can't make it or buy it. So, and this is another life lesson for you. If you decide to open up your own business and you want, and you think you need a business partner, or you think you need somebody to help you, really think about that. I mean, if you don't need that person, if you can hire somebody to do that job, then do it. There's no reason to have a partner if you don't need one. And believe me, partners can be just a real pain. Most people, when they go into business, they don't have an exit strategy. And if you have a partner, you definitely need an exit strategy, because the last thing you want to do is go into business with their significant other who had nothing to do with the business in the beginning. All right. So strategic alliance inputs such as nuts and bolts, buns on a hot dog, other commodities and supplies. Your book called these arm length relationships, and these are common in all types of industries and business. And then the type of partners you would have, inputs that can differentiate your product in the minds of the customers. So for automakers, inputs that influence your brand or reputation, Volvo. High value inputs or activities that make up a high percentage of your total cost, which is steel in the auto. And then inputs or activity that require significant coordination, like the AC units in the Toyotas, the steel makers for the cars and whatnot. All right, so we're going to stop right there because I know you guys are falling asleep. All right, on Wednesday, I'm going to